I thank everybody who is joining today. We know it's an important issue for every community, whether urban or rural. I walked out of my home this morning in the city of Toledo, and there was a lantern fly right next to my door frame. I jokingly said to Amy, I said, Amy, are you sure you're on the right track with these? They're beautiful. And but she, of course, explained that as beautiful as they may be, they create a lot of negative impact for our community, and we're going to delve into that as she goes through her presentation. I think that we're very close to peak season for lanternflies now, and it's a very timely topic. It's been in the news this week, and I really appreciate Amy as she's pretty much been the voice of the lanternfly issue, I think, in our community, and I appreciate her expertise. And it's so important to have her with us today and to have her expertise available to us so that we can be prepared and the communities, the members of TMACOG can be prepared to educate our own communities and our residents. This is an issue people need to be aware of, and that we as influencers of our community need to be able to share accurate information about. So events like today's TMACOG Tech are only possible because of our sponsors. So I want to take just a moment to thank the organizations that choose to support us, and specifically those that recognize the importance of TMACOG Tech and support it. Civil and Environmental Consultants Incorporated, Colliers Engineering and Design, DGL Consulting Engineers, First Energy, Fishback, OHM Advisors, and the Mannequin Smith Group Incorporated. And again, we are so grateful to them for making TMACOG Techs possible. Next, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping items, and then I will introduce our presenter. You may have questions during the presentation, and our chat is open. So we encourage you to share those in the chat box, and we can discuss them at the end of the presentation. And in case we don't get to your question, Amy's going to share her contact information at the end of the presentation. We're going to also follow up with some additional information, including some links and a recording of today's event. Now, if you don't receive emails regularly from TMACOG, you can go to our website at tmacog.org, and you can sign up to receive emails. So I will now, realizing that I've been remiss that I did not introduce myself. I'm Sandy Spang. I'm the Executive Director of the Toledo Metropolitan Area Council of Governments. So I apologize for not having introduced myself, but I'm very excited to introduce our presenter. Amy Stone is an educator with the Ohio State University Extension in Lucas County, and she's been with the Extension for over 32 years. She provides leadership in the areas of horticulture, natural resources, agriculture, and sustainability. Amy is a member of the OSU Woodland Stewards Team, the Toledo Lucas County Sustainability Commission, and the Toledo Urban Forestry Commission. Amy's specialization is invasive species, which includes plants, insects, and diseases, and their identification, detection, scouting, and management. Both the federal and state departments of agriculture directly refer clients to her with questions on the emerald ash borer, spongy moth, and today's topic, the spotted lanternfly. So I think you can tell that Amy is the right person to educate us about this topic. And so I'm going to turn things over to Amy. And again, as questions arise, please be sure to put those in our chat. Amy?
All right, let me get to the right screen here so I can share. Am I coming through loud and clear?
Sound great.
All right. So hopefully you should see my screen. Is that correct, Sandy?
Yes.
All right.
And see that very attractive bug.
Yes. All right. Well, we will talk about that very attractive bug. Let me figure out 1 second. I've got to move something over real quick. Maybe if I can grab it. There we go. Technology. Love it.
It's great when it works.
That's right. Okay, I think I'm all set up now. So I wanted to kind of introduce the topic of spotted lanternfly, but kind of gauge from the participants what your level of knowledge and understanding of this invasive. So my first question, and you can shout it out, you can put it in the chat box if you want, but how many have attended a spotted lanternfly presentation before, whether in kind of a classroom setting, online like we are today, or even maybe out in nature where you're
Let's,
seeing them firsthand?
yeah, I see people raising hands. Why don't we just have people raise hands so we can all see answers to that?
Perfect. All right,
Oh,
Beth.
yep.
Well, and hopefully today's presentation, whether you've experienced or actually went through a presentation or have experienced spotted lanternfly, which is my next question. How many of you have experienced either by visiting a location that had spotted lanternfly or currently in our general area are experiencing SLF? Seeing some more hands up. I appreciate that. That infestation may be in the nymphal stage where we're at right now, so the juvenile stage of the insect. It may be you've been traveling over the years into an area that had an infestation and you saw an adult or many adults, and hopefully didn't bring those back. But this is a really kind of popular topic. My voicemail has been loaded with people wanting more information, some email messages about the best way to try to get rid of them. And so today we're going to talk about kind of the life cycle, what we're seeing right now. We'll dive into it so you have a good understanding of that. We're going to talk about where it's at and then really kind of dive into like what does this all mean and how can we help and what do we need to do. And so right now we are still in the juvenile stage. So egg masses that hatched this spring, so they overwinter as eggs, are in really the first, second, third, and now fourth instar or fourth stage. First three are black and white. The fourth instar or stage is red, white, and black. And within the next couple weeks, we will be seeing adult activity, which really means that more people are going to see them. They're more obvious. They're an inch long, about a half inch wide with their wings closed. They can go over an inch wide or across when their wings are open. And they will not just jump like the nymphs are, but they will fly. And they're going to be bumping into people. You're going to see collections of them around buildings and on plants. And so people are really going to start to notice them. This is a map that was shared with from Cornell. It's their IPM project that they're trying to track and watch the expansion of spotted lanternfly. The infestation began in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia. See, I think they're right there on my map if you can see the cursor. And then, of course, we are here. And you can see that expansion. We know that this insect is an amazing hitchhiker, and that's one of the things that we want to think about now that it's here in Toledo, that if we're heading out for a vacation and going west, we want to make sure that our vehicles aren't going to be that vehicle that would move the insect somewhere else. And we'll talk about ways to do that and prevent that. If we drill down to Ohio, the Ohio Department of Agriculture recently expanded the quarantine. And you can see our neighbors to the south in Wood County, or at least from where I'm sitting today, were added to that quarantine, which really is a regulation to try to stop the artificial movement or lessen the artificial movement of this pest. So it would mean that if you are moving regulated items like nursery stock outside of those red areas into a white or gray area, there are protocols that need to be followed just to make sure we're not spreading it farther and faster than what it would naturally. So my goal is to educate whoever will listen, um, and try to get onto people's radars that maybe aren't even interested in spotted lanternfly, but making them aware of the insect and being extra sets of eyes. We know that it's here in our region, but as you travel, you may be the first to detect it in another area, another state, and could report that to help keep track of where this insect is. We briefly talked about life cycle, but just one more time, they start out as eggs that were laid last fall by the adult female. She can lay between 30 and 50 eggs, and she usually covers them up with a substance that kind of helps protect them a little bit more. They begin hatching, and we see these very small nymphs. A lot of people will say they resemble kind of a tick, both in size and the scale of that insect. They are super strong jumpers. So at the nymphal stage or immature stage, they do not fly. That doesn't occur until they're adults. And we are going to have those adults present in the environment until we get a hard frost or freeze in the fall. And so that's something to think about. A lot of insects kind of come and go and have a short window that we're exposed to as humans, and we see them out in the environment. This insect, unfortunately, begins in the early spring with the nymphs and then all the way through the adults into the fall. The other thing that I'm going to jump away from the insect is to really try to gain knowledge and understanding where Tree of Heaven is in your communities. This is one of the favorite host plants of this insect, and it is a non-native invasive tree that we've always wanted people to try to manage, but more so with the spotted lanternfly. And so if there can be projects where we identify where this tree is and try to reduce populations of the trees, especially in areas and alleyways, along the streets, anything can help. This tree has a male and a female version, and the female version's flowers are actually starting to go to seed, and they're very obvious which ones are females. And so they can produce hundreds and thousands of seeds that will pop up everywhere. And so if we can focus on even the female removals to lessen that introduction of new insect or of new Tree of Heaven trees for the insects to feed on. Spotted lanternfly at all stages, whether it's the nymphs or adults, are sucking sap from the trees. And so they process that sap, that sugar through their bodies, and it comes out the other end as honeydew, which is another reason this insect is kind of a nuisance. The larger the insect, so as we get into the adult stage, the more honeydew they're going to produce. That honeydew will collect on anything underneath the trees or the vegetation that they're feeding on. So if somebody happens to park their car under a large tree of heaven or a picnic table, it's going to become sticky, and then sooty mold comes in and attaches. And so then everything kind of turns kind of a black moldy color. It's also that sweetness is attractive to wasp and hornets and bees, especially in the fall as they change their diet. And so if people have allergic reactions to those stinging insects, it becomes more of an issue. So these are just some photos of the eggs. So on the far left, you can see where spotted lanternfly is actually covering up those eggs that she laid. It's almost like silly putty, kind of reflective when it happens. But then as it ages, you can see the photo to the far right, and down towards the bottom, it almost cracks like mud. There are some eggs that were just never covered up. Something happened to her before she was able to. So you can see those individual eggs that were laid in rows, and that's how they kind of look before they get covered up. These are just some photos that were sent to me this winter from individuals actually from the city of Toledo who were really aware of spotted lanternfly. They were trying to Reduced populations last year only saw very few adults, but over the winter when they were out looking kind of on their property borders, they found over 62 egg masses, some on just some scrubby like mulberry trees, a blue spruce, which they tend not to feed on evergreens, but it's a great place to kind of hide and be protected. And so they'll lay their eggs there over the winter. And so, as we go into the actual nymphs and the adults, and we're going to focus on those right now, the big message that you can put out in the fall and winter is to get your community members out looking for egg masses. And every egg mass that is scraped will reduce the population by 30 to 50 nymphs next spring. And so it can make a difference. So this is what we saw earlier this spring. So very small nymphs. Sometimes people will overlook them, but they become more obvious when their numbers are higher and they congregate together. We're starting to see that fourth instar or phase that I had talked about earlier. So it's the red. The insects are a little bit larger, but that brightness and color really draws your attention. And believe me, they are amazing hoppers or jumpers. And they will jump multiple times if you're trying to smash them or get them. And then finally, like I had mentioned, we're going to see adults in a couple more weeks. And that's really, I think, when a lot of people will notice them. This is really what we want to try to avoid, our high populations. So can we do some things that keep populations low? People don't want to be outside. They don't want to go to a park that's infested with, hundreds and thousands of spotted lanternfly. This is a building in downtown Toledo where the insects were collecting kind of during a migration phase, and you could just see them collecting. They would have to go out and vacuum those up on a daily basis, and before the afternoon, population numbers just really expanded. This is a video. Let's see if it will play.
All right, Amy, I'm retracting all comments about the attractiveness of this bug.
So damn thick.
I think
Yeah,
that early stage, that pretty red, yes, but I'm retracting all my comments now.
So again, this is what we want to avoid, right? And especially in areas that are, landscape that we want to be out and enjoy during the summer and the fall. Their second favorite host plant is grapes, and just wanted to show this video. And as I kind of walk you through it, I talked about the honeydew, which is the insect's excrement. And if you look at the screen, occasionally you'll see what looks like rain. So right here, if you can see my pointer, there's some here. So it kind of squirts out the back. So think of like a little squirt gun. I've been in situations where the populations are high and it almost feels like it's raining or misting because there's so much excrement coming out of those insects. And so to an entomologist, to somebody who loves insects, that's a cool thing, right? But most people are pretty grossed out about that. You'll also notice that where those insects are feeding, the sidewalks, the streets become sticky, and you can kind of track in that stickiness. And so there are factors of nuisance related to this pest. Potential impact as we look at agriculture, what we have found is that they also like maple trees. And so as we're tapping maples, or you have a red maple in your landscape, the adults especially will be drawn to that tree. And so if you are tapping that tree, that we tend to see a reduction in the sap that we get to create maple syrup or make maple syrup. So the sugar bush folks are very interested in trying to manage this pest outside of the sugar bush, so they don't see that decline in the maple syrup that they can produce. They also like hops vines, which ultimately, if you like beer, could impact what you're drinking. We've also seen and heard from honey producers that in the fall, the honeybees will actually forage for the honeydew of spotted lanternfly and bring that back to the hive and really give the honey a dark and very unusual taste. It's not as sweet. Some people actually prefer it, but I've heard descriptions as kind of smoky flavored, which that might be of interest, but I've also heard like body odor, plastic. And so it's the amount of excrement that they're bringing back to the hive can really change the taste of the honey. And of course, they like our grapevines, both wild and cultivated. And so the impact that they have on our vineyards is also one that we need to watch. And so even if you're not an agricultural producer or have agricultural producers in your community, we want to think about the food supply and how this insect could impact them. So what can be done? We talked a little bit about Tree of Heaven, so identifying those trees in the community. They can start out really small, and so we can go after those small ones. Those larger ones are more difficult, right? You'd have to hire somebody likely to take those trees down unless you have somebody on staff that is able to do that safely. If you look at Tree of Heaven, they have really stouty, thick branches. They have a heart-shaped scar, leaf scar, where that leaf came out of, and that's the bud for next year. The leaves can be up to 3 feet in length, and it's a compound leaf. And if you look really closely at each of the leaflets, you'll see these little kind of, I call them pimples or glands. And even if you can't see them, you can always feel it. And so sometimes people will get this tree confused maybe with black walnut or sumac. This plant, though, also has a very distinctive rancid peanut butter smell to it when you roughen up the leaves. So we have a lot of information on how to best manage Tree of Heaven. And so if they're very small and you can grab the whole plant out, that's awesome. But if any part of the leaf, or excuse me, the root is left, you are going to have another plant come up. Or if you cut down, a pretty good sized tree, hundreds of its relatives, meaning the root sprouts are going to sucker, will come to the funeral. And now instead of dealing with one Tree of Heaven, you're going to have a multitude of them. And so this is from Penn State. It's really some good information about what's happening with Tree of Heaven and the best times to control and manage that. And as we go into the fall is a really good time because the treatment that we make with an herbicide can then be taken down into the root system and you can get pretty good control. I always just like to mention this in passing. Whenever anybody hears about a new insect on the radar, potentially any insect that they come in contact with that summer is, oh my gosh, that's got to be spotted lanternfly. And so they're really distinct, and there really shouldn't be a confusion amongst them. But this is kind of our land grant friend to the south, Virginia, came up with some lookalikes. And so I always like to post those just to get people thinking, especially as egg masses. We would never want to remove praying mantis egg masses if we thought that they were spotted lanternfly. And then these are some lookalikes. And boy, we've seen a lot of wheel bug nymphs or reports of those as, hey, are these spotted lanternfly this season? So people are paying attention and are out there looking. We talked about vehicles and transportation. And so, some signage, especially if you're in a community that's not seeing outbreak populations to make people aware. And where do our roads take us? And so one thing that we recommend, especially if you're in a high infested area, moving to an area that's not infested, is potentially run your car through a car wash. Now I realize you're not going to do that every day if you're in an infested area, traveling maybe south to Wood County. But if you're going great distances, it's a good idea to wash those insects off. You've probably heard about Stomp It Out, but simply stomping them or collecting them or smashing them is an option. You can scrape egg masses. This is a new way to recycle different plastic bottles. If you empty them and you go at the insect straight on, their reaction is to jump. And so these have been great collection tools to go after them, and they jump right in. especially with lower populations. You can use shop vacs or backpack vacs to suck them up. I always have a bucket of soapy water next to me, so some of them die during that vacuuming process, but otherwise you can dump them in soapy water and they die very quickly. We're going to get into some of the traps. So some sticky band traps. As they walk up and down the tree, they get in that sticky band. We recommend that you put a wildlife barrier around them so you don't get squirrels, chipmunks, birds, butterflies, other off catches on that sticky trap. This is called a funnel trap, and so you're able to put it around trees where the insect is. They crawl up into it, into the bags, and then you can just replace those bags. This is a new trap that is being developed. It's not commercially available. It's roofing material. And so we are starting to make some of those to get them out and try to experiment with some master gardeners to see how they work, if people are willing to put those up. They are not going to do anything with this year's population, but what they found is the texture of that roofing material is very attractive to the female, and she will go up in there and lay eggs. And multiple females will do that. And so at the end of the season, you take that trap down, and there literally could be hundreds of egg masses. You can scrape them off and remove them, and then reuse the trap next late summer into fall. There are a lot of insecticides that work, and we are promoting the Penn State Extension fact sheet that talks about all of the active ingredients, its activity against SLF. Notice that not all insecticides are excellent, so we have some that are variable. We also address the residual activity. So are you making one treatment a season, or is it going to be multiple treatments? And then the timing of those treatments. Here's some other products that a lot of homeowners may be able to easily get their hands on. We encourage people to read the label. It is the law, and make sure they're making the application correctly. There's, some things that people are doing that really could be more harmful to the environment. With that, I rushed through. I got it done in the 30 minutes to allow for some time for questions and answers and feedback from you. I do want to share one slide, and then we'll go back to the questions and comments. I recently learned that the Cleveland Metro Parks, and we always are chatting with our colleagues across the state, they're encouraging people to become volunteers and scrape egg masses during the winter time, but they're creating this large event August 23rd, and I've already told them that we're going to do it here in Northwest Ohio. It's called the Big Squish, and whether you go to a community that is doing kind of a small event around it, or you're in your backyard, or anywhere you go, not just on that day, but there's going to be some really kind of media attention to it to try to reduce as many spotted lanternfly as we can in Ohio. And so don't forget the Big Squish, and I'll send Sandy some more information about that.
Absolutely. We will support the Big Squish. I think, Amy, as we're talking about what TMACOG members can do, we have 83 governmental members. And so when you're talking about parks, especially, we have some park districts that are members, but we also have members who maintain parks within their jurisdictions. And so when you were talking about the Tree of Heaven, I think it's that immediately came to mind, was making sure that your staff is familiar with that species and looking for opportunities to remove it from park areas, from right-of-ways along roadways, on public property, certainly, came to mind. I don't know if some of the folks on this TMACOG Tech have other thoughts of ways that townships, villages, cities, counties can participate as well. But I think we have an opportunity on the property that that our communities maintain, probably to to try to remove that tree of heaven where it has volunteered to grow. So that was a thought that came to mind. Um, and certainly people understanding that scraping is a viable way to remove the egg sacs. But, one thing that I think people often look to their community's website for is information, and we're going to be getting out some of your links. But I've seen home remedies. And so, in thinking about how some of our members can post things on their websites to give their community members accurate information, can you speak to that a little bit? Because you showed some techniques and you showed some pesticides, but we see a lot about using common home products and things. And so, I thought maybe you might want to speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. And so, with my role in extension, I will always recommend something that is labeled for the pest, right? And so, if we go inside to our kitchen and grab Dawn dish soap, it's not really labeled for insecticidal control. There are some horticultural soaps. Um, but what I have seen and received a few phone calls in recent weeks is people are using these home remedies, so things that haven't been researched or aren't labeled for that use, and they're actually causing some additional problems. And so plants, the foliage is starting to scorch because they're using too much of it or it's not as refined. They're using vinegar, which vinegar will kill them, but you're also putting vinegar on plants, into the soil, and we just have to be careful with some of those things. I mean, there are some videos out there of people using like torches. Now, we don't want, to burn anything down, but sometimes people capture those feeds on social media and they think, oh, I've got that in my kitchen or in the garage, and so we just have to be very careful. Also, people sometimes get a little panicked. And so when they reach for, maybe even it's a labeled insecticide, they don't read it, but they're applying it like every day. It potentially will impact other pollinators, other insects. And so I think we just have to do due diligence, see that we're making sure we're getting the right information. We're encouraging people to manage the pest if that's what they choose to do, rather than vacuum or traps or those kind of things, but do it safely and correctly.
Well, I think you've made a great case that there are economic impacts, there are recreational impacts, health impacts for our region with the spotted lanternfly. And this has been a great presentation. We're going to do everything we can to share it with all of our members throughout the region. And I'm so grateful to everyone who joined us today. You're now armed with more information. We'll make sure that we get Amy's information out. She's going to provide some additional links. Amy, I just am so glad that you're in our community and that you have this level of expertise and that you share it so well. I feel like I learned so much about this, and I'm so grateful that we have you to turn to. And you've offered here now your email and your phone, and I know that you're really there for us to add information. So I'm hoping that every community is thinking about putting this information on their website and putting information out to their community members. So if TMACOG can be of help, we want to be there for you. But I think that getting the word out about the big scrape is something that we can all do. So I'm glad that you're spearheading that, and we'll try to support you in that. So again, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your knowledge. We really appreciate it. And we hope that we can all together help our region by following your great advice today. Thank you.
Absolutely. And just in closing, I think it is important. I mean, I talked about the insect and how bad it can get. I mean, it does not pose a risk to human health. And so I think a lot of people are concerned about that when they see it in their landscape. Is it going to bite? Is it going to sting me? And so hopefully we can kind of lessen um, that concern that people have. And even though it is an agricultural pest, it's not an outright killer like many of us think about with emerald ash borer. And so newly transplanted plants, which a lot of communities are putting more trees into the environment, which is awesome. We do have to kind of protect those because if they feed on those heavily, but we're not going to see old, established, healthy, vigorous plants succumb to the insect, but it can stress them. And so, I think I don't want to have put any fear into people that, oh my gosh, this world, everything's going to die that they feed on, because that's not the case. But I think getting that correct information out and helpfully helping me share that information through your channels and through your communities really means a lot. So thank you for the opportunity. And if there's anything that I can do here with Extension, don't ever hesitate to ask.
Great, fantastic. Thanks so much. And you're getting some fan mail there, Amy. So I'll close on that. Everyone really appreciated your time today. Thanks so much.
Thanks.